Hey everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. Listen, if you've been following my Biblical Case for Women's Voice series, you may have heard these dreams already, but I promised on there that I would put them on here for a further interpretation because I was really just pressed for time, kind of threw out the idea of what these dreams mean. But if you haven't watched that and you're interested, please go and watch that. It's an awesome series. I spent a lot of time in prayer and studying over it, and I know that God showed up and gave revelation. So you'll hear some of that today, but if you want to see kind of how it completely unfolds, you'll want to watch that. This one is in the second video, I believe, but watch them all, okay? Watch them in order so you're not lost. There's lots of good stuff, but I do share a dream in video 2, video 3, and video 4 has a super awesome dream. I will also share that one on here, so you'll get the fullness of that. But if you really want to see what the series was about and how everything wrapped up together, I challenge you to watch that. It's super cool. Okay. All right, so I had this dream probably a week plus ago while doing my studies, and just really heavily bathing every moment of it in prayer and asking the Lord, give me answers, help me to understand what is going on. Unfortunately, it's an elephant. Some people believe women can teach and participate in the fivefold ministry, and some people don't. But I have been through the Bible so many times, and I can tell you that even though those verses are very emphatic, that they sound very emphatic, they actually mean something else. And we see little threads of truth woven in that points to that. And that's what that series was about, okay? And so I stepped out and said, I am going to search this out. I'm going to figure out the truth on these contexts, all right? And I did lots of study. I found lots of research, things that people have said for a long time, different theories. But the thing that I know about an interpretation, two things. One, interpretations belong to God. Genesis 40 verse 8. That's what I've been telling you guys for a long time, right? The second thing about an interpretation is if you don't have the right key, all the pieces aren't going to fit. When you have the right key, all the pieces will fit, okay? And I've heard so many interpretations, but then there's always, okay, then what about this though? And what about that though? Okay, and I'm not saying that I can solve all the world's problems, okay? And it's a very risky business to be involved in. But this is how God's been speaking through dreams for generations. He's been giving wisdom, preserving his people, okay? And it is a tool that we can use when we're asking for wisdom. The book of James says, if you lack wisdom, ask. And God gives liberally. He's either that God or he isn't. Okay, but to judge a person that sought out an answer and then say that that person isn't hearing from God because God doesn't actually speak, where is our faith? He's either a God who shows up and he's the God of the Bible or he isn't, okay? And so I believe that this dream right here that I'm about to share with you is a parable of insight of what was taking place in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 26 through 40, where Paul, first in chapter 11 says women can speak, but they have to have their head covered, and then turns right around and seemingly says women can't speak and it's a shame. Okay, and again, please watch that video. It's video number 2 in this series, but this is the dream that I had, okay? All right, so I'm observing some sort of church service. They seemed like young adults, and I'm not trying to be mean, but their service gave off a plain church kind of feel. So they may have been even youth. I just mean the service didn't really flow like our services normally do. It just seemed a little choppy and unorderly in comparison. But they were trying and doing their best. Up front near the stage, there is a young woman praying on her knees, head down to the floor. People are singing, I think, already here and there. That's what I mean by it was choppy. There were these lulls and pauses here and there. Then someone would do or say or sing something. I guess it was her turn to speak or whatever it was, or she must have thought it was. I didn't even know she was part of the worship team, but it makes sense now that I think about it. She must have been praying for God to give her revelation on what to say or sing in advance. So she gets up on the stage to start singing, because there's a lull, and she felt it was her turn maybe. So she sings like one line. It was beautiful. Sorry, hold on. She sings like one line, which was beautiful. I don't recall what it was, but I think she was singing in the Spirit, and she's getting ready to sing a little more, and then a man comes up on the stage next to her, interrupts her, completely hijacks the situation, and starts talking instead. I wish I could remember what he said, but he clearly thought that what he had to say was far more important than her, and that everyone should stop listening to her and listen to him instead. He said something like, I saw that, like when you scold a child for doing something like that they didn't think you would know or see or find out, or you're going to tell someone, right? I guess he felt the church service was, I guess he felt that the church was committing a crime for letting the lady speak. But I did get the feeling that most of the people thought this guy was off his rocker and that they weren't doing anything wrong. The lady never got to finish singing and looked embarrassed, but didn't do or say a thing. Okay, so a couple things I want to point out. Again, if you're looking for, if you're lost and you're like, I don't see how this fits, please watch video number 2 at the very least of my newest series, A Biblical Case for a Woman's Voice, because it is going to make so much more sense to you. Okay, but let's just pretend this is a dream that I'm just sharing to you and I never did another video. Okay. All right, so first thing I want to point out is that I was observing something super important, dreams and visions, okay? A vision is usually where you are not active in it. You are observing, not always, but it is almost all the time. This is how it is, okay? So that is super important. Notice I am not active in this dream at all, okay? This dream has nothing to do with me. This is something I'm observing, okay? All right. The second thing I want to point out is that, and that doesn't mean that all revelation from God is an observing dream. Okay, we could talk more about that another time. In fact, you'll see in another dream that that's not the case. All right, so you can see that this church service has this plain church feel, okay, to it. I said that it was choppy and unorderly. The whole context of 1 Corinthians, like 11 through 14 and a half, is about order. Obviously, the problem was that they needed order in the church. And so Paul is laying out order, okay? The second thing I say is that it was choppy, right? Like it just didn't seem to flow like our services do now, okay? In those days, it said that they didn't have like, okay, a worship team and then announcements and then the pastor comes up, that type of thing. Excuse me. Their church was like, everyone's filled with the Spirit right now, and people are taking turns prophesying, taking turns interpreting, taking turns giving a tongue, taking turns giving a word of encouragement. That was the order. That was the way it was. I wish we could go back to that. I get that there's some issues with, prophet lying, okay, to be point blank and those types of things, but we should get back to that. What we've moved into is too much show. It is too much based on what man thinks and not what God thinks. Doing things for the fear of man and what man might be like, I don't want to go to that church because people are always speaking in weird tongues that I don't understand and it makes me uncomfortable. We're afraid of stuff like that. Or like you just watched my series. How many churches have you been in that believe that women can teach and yet you never see women teaching? It's because they're afraid of the people. They're afraid that people will come in, see a woman teaching, and leave and never come back. Believe what you believe and stand in it. And if that's what you believe, if you really believe that a woman teaching is right, stand in it. You believe that's the will of God, stand in it. If you believe tongues is the will of God, stand in it. If you believe prophecy is the will of God, stand in it. Okay? That's what we should do, and not be worried about what other people say and think. And if you're going to have enough money to make your bills for the church, if you're doing the will of God, you have nothing to worry about. And those people that shun you for doing the will of God, I'm sorry, but they're not your people. Okay, Jesus even said that. He said, those who do the will of my Father in heaven, that's my sister and brother and mother. Okay? All right, so going back to that's how their service was. It was one person stands up, gives a tongue, okay? And you could see that there was lulls. And then once they're waiting, they're lingering in the spirit, waiting, okay? And I said that they were kind of like teenagers. They were playing church because they're trying to model what they must have seen, what Paul must have laid out, what they must have experienced when Paul was there, putting his apostolic anointing and causing this reformation and this new revival, okay? And so they're mimicking it just like kids do when they play church, okay? So you can see they're new, but they were doing their best, I said, okay? And the problem was this. A woman went up to speak, and a man came over, hijacked the whole thing, not only felt that what he had to say was more important, meaning he's the only one that can hear from God, and if she heard anything from God, it must not be important, but also that he criticized the audience. And I said, he made it sound like the church was committing a crime for letting a woman speak. But I felt that most the people in the church thought the guy was off his rocker, okay? The Lord revealed to me this man is not Paul, okay? What I greatly believe happened was that this person, whoever, leader or whatever, somebody, you could see it here, he's like, I saw that. Like, I am going to tell Paul, and you're going to be in trouble because women should not speak in church. It is a shame for them to speak. And if you do any research on the Talmud, you'll find out why that was a shame for women to speak. That was not God's law. Yes, it says in the law that women should be subject to their husbands. In other words, it says your husband will rule over you, okay? And we're to be submissive. But it does not say that a woman can't speak in church. That was Talmud law, woven in. And so I believe that this man wrote Paul and complained to the new pastor, whatever, leader of the Corinth church. And Paul was quoting what this man said and retorting it and saying, look, I've given you the layout of the order. That included women prophesying and praying out loud as long as their head's covered. And if you don't like it, if you don't agree, if you don't think that the words I'm giving you are commandments from the Lord, then let you be ignorant. You'd have to watch the video to completely understand that. But I 100% believe that this dream was given to me by the Lord. I understand colorations. You should know that by now. If you're following this series, it's because you know me and trust me. And you know that I've been in this for a while, okay? And so this is a parable. This gives us insight on what was taking place. Some man or men were upset because in the past, women were not allowed to participate in church. Only men. Men were obligated to do part of these Talmud rituals and that type of stuff, okay? Women were released from the obligation because they had home stuff to take care of, right? And no one wants a crying baby in service, and the women weren't allowed to be seen by the men because it was a sexual distraction, nor were they allowed to speak because it was a sexual distraction, okay? This is the kind of stuff that they were doing. And so when Jesus died and Paul is setting up all these churches right under his apostolic, calling, these men and women are trying to learn how to get along together. Okay, and some of them were like, oh, praise God, I get to have my wife here with me, or you know what, we all get to fellowship together, this is great. And other people were like, no, the law forbids a woman to be here. The law forbids a woman to be speaking in public. Also because he felt what he had to say was more important, sadly. Okay, so I hope that ministers to you. And I'm going to share the other dream from Galatians as well in the next video. I hope that kind of unwraps it a little bit more and makes it a little bit more easier to understand, because I know in the video I didn't have a lot of time to go in, depth to depth, but we can see that she was praying, asking God for revelation. God gave her revelation. She went up and she was cut off and she was not allowed to finish what she was saying, okay? But nowhere in here is this God saying women can't speak in church, okay? That's not what's taking place. And I promise you it will make more sense if you watch that other video. All right, so I'm going to also do a video on the, I think I said Galatians, but that's not what I meant if I said Galatians, on the 1 Timothy one, okay, as well. All right, so I will see you in the next video.